When I look at narcissism through the vulnerability lens, I see the shame-based fear of being ordinary. I see the fear of never feeling extraordinary enough to be noticed, to be lovable, to belong, or to cultivate a sense of purpose. Brené Brown. It was a sunny afternoon and I was on the porch, having a glass of iced tea and trying to decide if I wanted to go for a walk because it was a particularly beautiful day. I remember this day because I had my sunglasses on and I looked at the sky through them. Of course, because of how opaque the glasses were, I didn't get to see the clear, pretty blue of the sky, nor the blindingly white, fluffy clouds clearly. It was at this point that I got a call from Sally, a young woman who was distressed because she claimed that her husband was a narcissist and an abuser. I quickly calmed her down, and we scheduled a meeting. When we met, she told me that she'd been unhappy in her marriage, and she just realized that her husband was a narcissist thanks to a helpful TikTok video she saw. When we examined his behavior, her behavior, and what narcissism truly was, she had to reluctantly admit that she was wrong on a few counts. I got together with Sally and her husband, and thankfully, they were able to clear up their issues because they were both invested in their marriage. I sat out on the porch after my last meeting with them and realized that Sally had been the victim of misinformation. She couldn't see her husband for who he really was, or his faults for what they were, because her vision was blocked by false perceptions, much like when I observed the sky through my sunglasses. Olivia. Are you in the same situation as Sally in the story above? Let's find out. How to know if someone is a narcissist or just plain abusive. Did you know that narcissism can and should be officially diagnosed by a mental health expert? Source: Cleveland Clinic 2020. Have you ever heard of narcissistic personality disorder? Yes, it's a whole thing, and there's a specific guideline for its diagnosis. I'd like to ask you a question, if you don't mind. How many people have you labeled as a narcissist just because you didn't like a particular behavior or attitude? Did you know that even the average, normal person is manipulative to an extent? Did you know that even innocent children can be manipulative too? So, where do you draw the line? How can you clearly detect an abusive person or tell if they're narcissistic or even codependent? The fact is that while we admit that abuse can occur in various ways and affect various aspects of one's life, not every abusive person is a narcissist. Don't get me wrong, being abused is detrimental, no matter what form it takes. But it's important for us to be specific about the personality of the abuser and the type of abuse. This is because each abusive personality has different effects on their victim, and a thorough knowledge is needed for healing to be effective. Another interesting tidbit is that, according to clinical therapist Dr. Alyssa Mankow, 2020, people with narcissistic behaviors do not automatically have narcissistic personality disorder. This means that even though the people in our lives may exhibit some narcissistic behaviors, we can't just diagnose them with a disorder. Narcissistic abuse is centered on the abuser and is a reflection of the fact that they lack empathy, have an inflated sense of self-importance, and need to be admired. All their narcissistic behaviors stem from these major roots. And any abuse that's perpetrated for reasons outside these can't be qualified as narcissistic abuse. Understanding what NPD is all about. Narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD, is a mental health disorder characterized by a need for special treatment or admiration, a sense of self-importance or grandiosity, and a consistent fantasy of exaggerated power. Source: Cassell et al. 2017. According to the 5th edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM-5, NPD is classified as a Cluster B personality disorder. This class of disorders involves dramatic, emotional, and erratic behavior. NPD is one of the personality disorders that's diagnosed least often. Source: Pies 2011. A lack of empathy, in addition to a need for special attention and feelings of grandiosity, are hallmarks of NPD. Source: Ronningstam and Weinberg 2013. It is interesting to note that people with NPD often have an air of confidence or arrogance that may be described as condescending. However, in actuality, these individuals usually struggle with low self-esteem and feelings of inadequacy. I've already mentioned that a lot of people may exhibit narcissist traits, but there is a particular set of criteria that has to be met before NPD is diagnosed. Of course, people that have NPD are greatly affected when it comes to their interpersonal relationships and their life in general. More often than not, they try to control and manipulate those around them, even when it's harmful to others. According to the American Psychiatric Association, NPD usually starts when the narcissist is in early adulthood. Source: APA 2013. And it is more common in men than women. Source: Ronningstam and Weinberg 2013. So when can we definitely say that someone has NPD? Well, Dr. Zach Rosenthal, as cited by Biggers 2022, believes that NPD can be diagnosed when someone exhibits any 5 of these 9 characteristics. 1. A desire and a tendency to oppress others. 2. A lack of empathy. 3. An exaggerated sense of self-importance. 4. An obsession with fantasies of fame and brilliance. 5. A resentment of others or a belief that other people are resentful of them. 6. A thirst for undue attention and admiration. 7. A belief that they're extraordinary or special and can only be understood by other special people, and they should only associate with other special people. 8. A sense of entitlement. 9. A tendency to exhibit conceited or egotistical behaviors. Of course, this diagnosis is best made by a mental health expert, but I believe it's easy to put 2 and 2 together by yourself, especially if you've taken the pains to do the proper research. If you have a narcissist in your life, you may believe that it's easier for you to just go with the flow and put up with their excessive behaviors, especially because they don't know how to handle criticism or disagreement. Unfortunately, you'll find that doing this will only stretch you till you break, and the narcissist will still demand that you stretch further. Isn't it better to find out how to handle them once and for all without losing any more of yourself? Traits of a person with NPD. According to the American Psychological Association's dictionary, a trait is an enduring personality characteristic that describes or determines an individual's behavior across a wide range of situations. APA-ND. Furthermore, Encyclopedia Britannica defines personality as a characteristic way of thinking, feeling, and behaving. That means a person's personality is their habitual or default way of being in the world. It affects their attitude, mood, and even their opinions, and it's how we each make our mark on the world. Source: Halsman 2023. If we follow this line of thought, a trait is also a person's habitual behaviors, thought patterns, and feelings. People with a particular trait are naturally inclined to behave in that particular way the vast majority of the time, all things being equal. It's extremely important to highlight these differences here, so that you have a clear understanding of the condition and you'll be able to assess someone's behavior and thought patterns before you slap the narcissist label on them. Let's take a deeper look at the habitual behaviors, thoughts, and feelings, the traits, of someone with NPD. Lack of empathy. Narcissists often do not have the capacity or have a limited capacity to understand or care about anyone else's feelings. They have a hard time apologizing and can't view matters from another person's perspective. A narcissist partner or friend can't truly validate your feelings or understand you because of this trait. Frequent attempts to monopolize conversations and gatherings. Talking over others, interrupting them, and directing the conversation back to themselves or to their achievements is a common narcissistic trait that may be easy to spot. The typical narcissist believes that they deserve to be in the spotlight, no matter where they are, and will stop at nothing to achieve that. This feeds into their need for special attention and their desire to be recognized, and also pacifies their internal struggle with low self-esteem. Overblown sense of self-importance. The average narcissist is convinced that they're the best thing since sliced bread, and they don't keep that to themselves. They feel that they're special, superior, or set apart from everyone else, and that they deserve to only mingle with other special people like them. To top it all off, they also have grand fantasies about gaining massive power, admiration, fame, or even love. Shallow relationships. Most narcissists are not capable of showing empathy, and this is reflected in the quality of relationships they have with others. No matter how intense or committed they may seem to someone, they view relationships as transactional, and they only participate when they have a lot to gain. They never want to take the blame, are convinced that other people are jealous of them, are jealous of everyone, and they have no qualms about pretending to love you just to get you attached to them. They love to have control over their relationships and will do anything to retain said control, no matter how dramatic. They are also very vengeful and do not like being criticized, corrected, or disagreed with. Gaslighting. This is another popular buzzword that refers to the situation when someone says or does something to you and later denies the words or actions in such an expert manner that you're convinced you hallucinated those events. They do this to make you discredit your own senses and rely on their judgment rather than your own. There are a lot of narcissistic traits apart from these popular ones which come up in different forms in response to certain social behaviors. A narcissist's traits also depend on what kind of narcissist they are. Types of narcissists and what they do. Something a lot of people struggle with is acknowledging that their partner, parent, or any other loved one is a narcissist, especially after they've done a lot of research on NPD. Even though they may identify one or two traits, they simply refuse to believe that someone they love lacks empathy or is manipulative. This is mostly because narcissists are great at pretending. They will pretend to be friendly, warm, loving, or generous, whatever it takes to keep you on their hook. There are various types of narcissists, and you may recognize someone you know in one of these subtypes. 1. The overt or obvious narcissist. This is also known as grandiose narcissism or agentic narcissism. They fit the typical description of a narc. They're arrogant, confident, assertive, competitive, aggressive, and they always strive to be the center of attention. They're most likely selfish, overbearing, and stubborn. They have an exaggerated sense of their intelligence and capabilities. 2. The covert or closet narcissist. They can also be called vulnerable narcissists because they don't fit the regular pattern of the typical narc. They are more passive-aggressive and can experience anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. This makes them unable to receive criticism. They would rather avoid that scenario than be told off. They may not exhibit the typical traits of narcissism, but they definitely possess the major narc characteristics. They can seem like saints, and they often associate with people that they admire. They also feel like they've been constantly victimized, and they're convinced that others are out to get them. They almost seem to feed off of the empathy and attention. 3. The toxic narcissist. This group of narcs can be described as narcissism on steroids. They exist on the more severe end of the spectrum of toxicity and may exhibit other strongly negative traits like sadism, paranoia, and hostility. They have been described as the most dangerous type of narcissists because they will stop at nothing to achieve their goals. even if it hurts the other person physically, mentally, emotionally, or financially. 4. The communal narcissist. This type of narc is all about being good and fair to others. They often have a high moral standard and are quick to fight against what they perceive to be injustice. The big problem here is that these types of narcissists are doing this for the social recognition and power that come from being a freedom fighter. Another obvious discrepancy is the fact that their behavior often doesn't match up to their ideals under close scrutiny. Which of these narcissists have you encountered before? Take a moment to examine your various relationships and evaluate them. Codependent or obsessive. We all agree that humans need other humans and that no man is an island. In fact, some level of vulnerability and dependence is encouraged when done in a healthy manner. On the other hand, codependency comes into the picture when there is an unhealthy reliance on someone else. This behavior is born of low self-esteem, where the person who suffers from it comes to rely on an external source for validation. This goes a step further than being a people person or being madly in love. A codependent individual has a hard time delineating their identity from the other person's. They don't know how to think for themselves or even what to feel about themselves, other people, and other situations. This comes about as a result of being raised in a dysfunctional environment with a lot of neglect and ignorance at play. This lack of a strong sense of identity and an absence of self-love may translate into feelings of anxiety for the codependent individual, which makes them fixated on their relationships to distract themselves from the internal chaos. The answer to the question above is that codependency and obsession often go hand in hand. Am I codependent? The main theme of codependency is that the codependent individual puts other people's needs above their own. Now, it's essential to find out if you're a true romantic or if you're actually codependent. Here are a few signs that may indicate you're codependent. You find it difficult to make decisions in your relationship. You don't trust yourself and you have low self-esteem. You're afraid of being abandoned. You don't pay attention to your own needs or desires. You're always apologizing or taking the blame to avoid any drama. You're excessively worried about the other person's behaviors. You feel guilty whenever you do something for yourself alone. You always prefer to avoid conflict. You find yourself craving approval from other people. Your mood reflects other people's moods, not your own emotions. You try to control the other person's life or make decisions for them. You entertain fantasies about the other person and the state of your relationship with them, even if you're not fulfilled in the relationship. When you find that your desire for your partner or loved one's well-being begins to cross the boundary into the unhealthy zone, then you need to step back and take a good look at what's happening.